In this episode of Kitchen Nightmares: The Aftermath, a small town in the beautiful, lush countryside of Wales, one man built up a restaurant and made it a success. A new owner, stubborn and ignorant, is destroying its reputation. With no head chef in the kitchen, two sous chefs are competing for the leadership role, one shy and talented, the other strong but selfish, and a waiter showing off his trouser hams to Gordon. Can Ramsay save this restaurant? Find out in today's episode of Kitchen Nightmares: The Aftermath. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear me do more intros.
Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of Kitchen Nightmares: The Aftermath. Today we will check in to see what happened to the walnut tree and the most notable people after Gordon made his visit. We are still busy with the first two seasons of the show. This is my third episode, and also the third episode of season 1 of Kitchen Nightmares. If you would like to see some of the other videos I uploaded, click in the top right corner of your screen. Don't forget to subscribe, so as not to miss out on new videos I upload. So Gordon makes his way over to the Walnut Tree Inn at Llandudno Sguryd, Wales. One thing to keep in mind about this restaurant is that it already has a Michelin star, yet it's still failing. It received the Michelin star under the previous owner, who ran it successfully for 30 years. The name of the previous owner is Franco Taruscio, a famous Italian chef who is widely believed to be the first reality TV chef. Under Franco, the restaurant had huge success. People came from far and wide to taste his food. Gordon also mentions that it's rumored Franco took home £30,000 a week during that time. The restaurant was later bought by Francesco Mattioli, who has experience managing some of the best restaurants in London. However, during the 3 years he has owned it, nothing goes as we would have assumed it would, given Francesco's experience in the industry. Instead, he is losing money, and at risk of losing his Michelin star. Gordon finds out that Francesco had lost his Michelin star chef, and takes to the kitchen himself. This turns out exactly as we the viewers would expect, a massive failure. Since Francesco is not a trained chef, you can imagine the quality of the dishes he will be putting out. He is not trained to be in the kitchen. His years of experience taught him to charm diners and manage restaurant finances and such. Upon entering the kitchen, Gordon finds a full brigade of staff. He mentions that there are currently more staff in the kitchen than there are diners in the restaurant. Majority of them are standing around and doing nothing. One chef has the duty of only peeling and cooking potatoes. After seeing the state of the kitchen, Gordon concludes that Francesco doesn't seem to trust the staff and does almost everything himself. Gordon then sits down with Francesco and tells him that the Walnut Tree is an exceptional place and that he should focus on selling wines, which is his best strength, along with being able to charm diners. This is an attempt by Gordon to try and get Francesco out of the kitchen. Later on, Gordon tells Francesco that he would like to try some of the food. Instead of choosing from the menu, he asks Francesco to cook him 3 dishes, which the Walnut Tree is known for. He is served porcini and Parma ham lasagna, a dish which Gordon says the restaurant used to be well known for. The following dish, which Gordon was looking forward to, is a cooked fish stew, but to his disappointment, the mussels weren't cleaned properly, with Gordon describing it as being served a bowl of clay, seasoned with sand. Gordon returns to the kitchen clearly upset. With Francesco present, he gives his negative feedback to the staff concerning what he had just experienced. Francesco doesn't look impressed by Gordon's criticism, but he assures Francesco that they will start changing things up the next day, since they have already hit rock bottom and the only way is up from here. The following day, Gordon and Francesco sit down to discuss the possibility of hiring a new head chef. They list the criteria of possible candidates and decide to give the candidates a task of cooking a meal with certain ingredients to see if they have the ability to run the kitchen successfully. Keep in mind that chefs need to change menus with the seasons and be creative with their dishes. The first candidate is Ross, who is a qualified chef and soft-spoken. After some questioning, he is asked what his salary expectation is, to which Ross answers he is looking at £30,000 a year. Gordon then sets him to the kitchen, where Ross finds ingredients to cook a random dish to prove his mettle. Upon completion of his dish, Gordon and Francesco give it a taste, and describe the pasta as being raw. Gordon then tells Ross that the dish he created lacked creativity, and that it's just plain and boring. and not worth the £30,000 a year. Before leaving, Ross tries to defend himself, saying that he was only given a certain amount of ingredients, to which Gordon quickly shuts him down, telling him not to blame his tools. Ross agrees and leaves later on, safe to say that he won't be getting the job. The next candidate is Santoroso, who is the second in command at the Holiday Inn. Gordon and Francesco expect him to at least be up to standard, since he has a high position. However, Francesco and Gordon still have their reservations about him, with Francesco saying that he could be a bandito. Gordon agrees and they continue to ask him the usual interview questions. Santoroso, when asked what he knows about the Walnut tree, responds by saying that he knows nothing. The answer shocks Gordon and Francesco. When asked about the menu at the Holiday Inn, Santoroso gives a very unimpressive response, which lacks a lot of information and sets off alarm bells to Gordon. He says that they have a lot of steak, gammon, chicken, and microwaves. Undeterred, Gordon sets him off to the kitchen and gives him the same task he gave Ross. After completion, Gordon and Francesco aren't very impressed with the dishes. Francesco even showed clear embarrassment due to the fact that Santoroso is also an Italian. Needless to say, Gordon and Francesco tell him it's not what they wanted, that the dishes are below average, and thanked him for coming. Later that night, Gordon bans Francesco from the kitchen. He places masking tape to draw a line, which Francesco cannot cross to enter the kitchen. He does this to get to know the team, without involvement from Francesco, and wants to see how good they are. We now get to meet the team. Blake, a junior who had just started in the kitchen. Danny, which will be called Spike from now on, is there for work experience. Kevin is a waiter and handyman. He has been at the Walnut tree since the beginning and knows the place in and out. Gary is a local boy and sous chef who Gordon describes as being very ambitious and goal-driven. However, Gordon is told by Francesco that Gary is not a team player and only looks out for himself. The last one we get to meet is Stefano. Gordon describes him as being the most experienced and looking to place him as the head chef. But first, he would like to see what Stefano is made of. Gordon proceeds to put Stefano in charge of the lunch service and immediately notices that he does not communicate properly. Besides having a heavy Italian accent, he doesn't quite speak up and does not follow up the orders with the rest of the brigade. This doesn't go too well, since Francesco is hosting lunch for friends and family. The dishes were cold, and French fries was sent out late. That's just to name a few. Gordon puts pressure on Stefano to do his job properly, but in the end swaps him out for Gary, though being selfish and competitive, has the skills to communicate properly. The following day, Gordon decides to head out into town and speak to some of the locals. He is specifically looking for those who frequented the restaurant when Franco still owned it. After talking to some of them, he finds out most of them had last been there with Franco's going away party. Many of them also complain that the food is now too high priced, and the dishes are of poor quality. All that since Francesco took over the Walnut tree. Upon Gordon's return to the restaurant, he goes through the menu with Francesco. He claims the reason for his high prices are that the ingredients have become more expensive. Gordon doesn't seem to believe him, but changes the topic to the chefs. He tells Francesco that he should consider promoting one of the sous chefs, for since he has no head chef and the kitchen needs leadership. Francesco, however, is adamant on the fact that he wants a new head chef. In order to convince Francesco, Gordon gets both Stefano and Gary to cook meals for Francesco and his wife, under the guise that Gordon made it. Stefano gets working with the team, prepping for the evening. He does this while also preparing his meals for tonight. On the other hand, Gary, who just cares about himself, ignores the team completely to focus on his dishes. This leads Gordon to later instruct Gary to take over from Stefano, so that he could also have proper time to cook his dishes. Stefano makes a ravioli starter and sea bass main course. Gary does an oyster starter and filet steak. Francesco and his wife love the food, especially the ravioli. However, Francesco does have his reservations about the steak, saying that it needed some potatoes to balance out the meal. But overall, the food gets a good approval from him. It is then that Gordon reveals that it wasn't he who actually cooked the meals, but Stefano and Gary. While shocked at the creativity of his sous chefs, Francesco still remains firm on his decision to get a new head chef in the kitchen. The next day, Gordon has another sit-down with Francesco about lowering the prices. Gordon mentions to him that keeping the prices high will only dissuade the customers from returning to the restaurant, Instead, lowering the prices and hooking them with good food could see them return, and Francesco can over a period of time increase the prices. Gordon also brings in a new chef, who is applying for the position as head chef. Chef Spencer Ralph, a young and enthusiastic chef, also very creative. They give him the same opportunity as the previous candidates, and his food impresses them both. Also, he said that he would be happy with £23,000 a year as a start. Francesco and Gordon agree to later hire Spencer, as he is the perfect candidate. Gordon then, along with all the staff, Francesco included, sets out to redecorate the restaurant. They change it from the cold and formal look to a new cozy environment. Kevin, who has been there the longest, also helps with repainting the restaurant, and mentions it has the old look back, like the way it used to be. Gordon also revamps the menu, and teaches the team in the kitchen how to prepare the dishes. Gordon also mentions that the restaurant in its heyday would see customers turning up for lunch, then staying hours, drinking wine and spending even more money. He feels that to bring back that kind of trust and environment, the restaurant needs a picture of Franco and Francesco at the entrance, so people can see a successful handover and approval by Franco himself. Francesco agrees, and he and Gordon set off, planning it all to come to fruition on the 40th anniversary of the Walnut Tree Inn, where he would invite Franco and his family for a celebration. After a long day of work, Gordon and the rest of the staff go down to the pub, which Kevin had been inviting them to all week. While at the pub, they enjoy some food and drinks, and a karaoke display by Kevin, who proceeds to shake his booty half naked to the camera. While preparing for the dinner party, Gordon notices that Stefano is very talented and shy, and Gary confident, but not as talented. He comes to the realization that this is why Francesco may not have wanted to promote either of the two to head chef. At the party, they serve the guests canapes and champagne. The guests absolutely love the food, and Francesco and Franco together blow out the cakes on the cake. After the party, Francesco's wife makes a toast to the staff, thanking them for all their hard work so far. Adding to the good relaunch, the next day Spencer Ralph calls to accept the job offer as head chef. This leads to Gordon and Francesco now deciding to let one of the sous chefs go. Gordon puts his money on Stefano, opting to let Gary go instead, as in his view, Stefano is much more talented and can learn a lot from Spencer, while Gary, on the other hand, is too selfish and competitive, and Gordon believes he won't make a good head chef. Before leaving, Gordon gives them a picture of the mussels he was served on his first day. A month later, upon his return, Gordon is glad to discover Francesco hasn't been in the kitchen again. It's a sign that Spencer knows what he's doing. But not all the news is good, since the restaurant has since lost its Michelin star, and the restaurant is still not getting enough clients into the door. Gordon also finds out that Stefano left instead of Gary. Upon talking to Gary, he finds out Stefano was upset that Spencer could make changes, and after asking Francesco for months, would not agree to any of his, so he opted to quit and find employment elsewhere. Gordon again hits the streets and chats up some of the locals. They all still seem to think the restaurant is still too expensive, so Gordon goes back to Francesco, and they still disagree on the price changes. Gordon then decides to go to the kitchen, and notices that Spencer uses expensive ingredients and that the large scallops he uses can be reduced and cut into more slices. So he opts to change from the baby veg to regular veg, which has more flavor, and also add less scallops and cut them in 3 instead of 2. He shows Spencer how to reduce the cost of dishes, and serves up the meal to Francesco. The following conversation between Gordon and Francesco didn't go the way I thought it would. Francesco becomes extremely aggravated with Gordon. They have a complete disagreement, with Francesco adamant that he won't drop his prices, and he won't change his ingredients. Gordon tries multiple times during the conversation to explain the reasoning behind this, but Francesco refuses. In the end, Gordon tells him that if it fails, that Francesco should not put the blame on Gordon, since he clearly has been trying to help, but it's been refused. They shake hands, and Gordon leaves, clearly upset. So that's the recap of the episode, and the revisit. So what happened next? This may not be a surprise to any of us, but the Walnut Tree closed down in February 2007. But there is a good ending for the restaurant. Someone saw the potential of the Walnut Tree Inn, and that someone was Chef Sean Hill. He reopened the Walnut Tree in December 2007, and it remains open until this day. with fantastic reviews on TripAdvisor and Yelp. The restaurant also has its own operation website, which you can find with a quick Google search, or by typing in the address on screen. The restaurant was named the AA Restaurant of the Year for 2008. It has also received a Michelin star in 2010, and has kept it every year since. So if you would like to experience the same building featured in the show, you can. The menu may not be the same as featured in Kitchen Nightmares. After the episode, Chef Spencer went on to work at the Swan Inn, which is situated in Chiddingfold. He later left the position he had there to work at Zafferano Catering from 2015 up to 2019. He then took up a job working for Tate's Eats in London from 2019 until present. Seems like everything worked out well for him. After leaving the Walnut Tree, Stefano moved back to London and became head chef at the Osteria Emilia. He is still there today. On the website of the restaurant, you can see a modern-day picture of him and his employment history, which includes the Walnut Tree Inn. Sous chef Gary became the head chef at the Crown Pantigilli. He is currently still there, and it looks like he has learned to become more creative with his dishes. You can see some of his dishes on the restaurant website, and even a modern-day picture of him. So all worked out well for Chef Gary too. The sour apple in this part of the story has to be Francesco and his wife. Speaking publicly to some newspaper outlets, they tried to push most of the blame onto Gordon, regardless of us seeing in the episode him being stubborn and promising not to blame his failure on Gordon. They said the show portrayed them as being expensive, and that's what chased off customers. However, in the same articles they allude to Gordon being just one of the factors that led to their closing. They don't bother to go into them, since we as the viewers already know what they are. I have to say, I'm really disappointed in Francesco. He took up the position as manager at the La Petite Maison in London. I'm not sure if he still works there, as finding him on social media wasn't fruitful. But a 2007 article, recently updated as late as 2017, suggests he still does. Time for me to rant and say what we're all thinking. Francesco is the one to be blamed here, not Gordon. Francesco, as we could see, and even stated by Gordon, is a very stubborn man. He refused to promote his two sous chefs, and he refused to tweak his menu to reduce the cost of his dishes. He alone was to be blamed for the failure. Gordon even got Franco, the previous owner, who had made the restaurant a success, to attend the relaunch, and set them off on the right path. But, due to Francesco not dropping the prices, the clients did not return. They talk about clients with Ferraris and Porsches, but those clients won't keep the doors open. All money is good money, and Francesco, obsessing over being the cream of the crop, made his own restaurant a failure. He thought he knew better, but we again see another stubborn owner and their downfall. This is a common theme we will see throughout the series. Owners fail, and they blame Gordon. But I digress. Anyway guys, that's it from me. I hope you guys liked the video and the information I dug up for you. If you found the video informative, please subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.